Hey, everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that The Demon Plague, a new podcast from me and everybody here at DSPN, is coming your way. It's also a live stream that will be available on the Don't Split the Podcast Network Twitch stream and on our YouTube channel. You should definitely check it out. It is an actual play 5th edition D&D podcast that I will be running my Demon Plague adventure, which kickstarted at the beginning of the year for an awesome crew of players. I'm talking about Rudy Basso, TK Johnson, Lauren Urban, and Robert Aducci. You are going to want to check it out, so head on over to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com and click on The Demon Plague to get all the details. Our first live stream is this Tuesday, the 18th. You'll get all the details over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I'm talking with Cecil Howe, who's an amazing game designer and cartographer who I've talked to before. We're talking about his new game, The Forest Hymn and Picnic, which uses Shadow of the Demon Lord rules to create something very different than Shadow of the Demon Lord. I am really excited to share this conversation with you. Cecil is an amazing person. He can do pretty much everything. So let's dive in. Okay, everybody, now I'm here with one of my favorite people in the entire world, Cecil Howe. How are you, man? Welcome back to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi, thanks for having me again. It's awesome. I love this podcast. My name is Cecil Howe, and I work in role-playing games. I've worn a lot of hats, actually, since the last time I was here. I think the last time I was here was basically to talk about maps, because that's like my main thing. But I've moved on, and I've done some other stuff. So I do a lot of stuff in role-playing games.
I want to talk to you because it's been really cool to see sort of the breadth of things that you have done. You've worked on so many different projects. I think people might know your work, Shadow the Demon Lord. People who listen to this podcast are big Mike Shea fans, so they probably know your map from Fantastic Adventures and things like that. But you're also a game designer too, and you have designed some really awesome games. One that we're going to talk about today because you've got a Kickstarter rolling, so we shouldn't bury the lead. We should tell people, like, go check out The Forest Hymn and Picnic on Kickstarter right now because it's great. And if you like any of Cecil's other work, you're going to really like this as well. And you should also check out the website that we're going to talk about as well, because you've made a really cool website that's very deep and introduces people to the game. So let's talk a little bit about your game design experience. I know we talked about that the last time you were on here, but people might know you from some other stuff as well, right?
Sure. So like you mentioned, I do a lot of work for Shadow of the Demon Lord. Mostly I do cartography. Like right before we started this interview, I was turning in a map to Rob. So like I just finished that up this morning. But I've also written a couple of things for Shadow of the Demon Lord. My very first real game design experience was writing the item splat for Demon Lord with a few other guys. That was a weird experience because every single item I wrote for that book actually got cut.
Really?
Yeah. But I wrote this ridiculous, almost like for fun, didn't think Rob would want it. I wrote this wandering merchant table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 20 different ridiculous wandering merchants. Like one is actually not a merchant. It's a circle of kids that have been ensorcelled by a witch, and they're each holding an item. And once you buy the item from the kid, they're released from the curse or the sorcery and stuff like that.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. And you've also got, of course, Do Not Let Us Die in the Dark Night of This Cold Winter, which we talked about a little bit on our last podcast as well, which I think is also a really great game. People should definitely check out. So shout out to Greg Blair for introducing me to that. It's really, really cool. Do you want to talk about that for just a minute?
Sure, yeah. That Do Not Let Us Die in the Dark Night of This Cold Winter. It's like an abstract survival mini game. You plop it into whatever game you're playing. Doesn't matter what rules or system you're playing. Works best with fantasy stuff, The group is put in charge of a village, and you need to get the village through the worst winter of all time. And so there's abstractions for collecting supplies and distributing them among the villagers to try to keep as many alive as possible. So it's fun. It sounds more intense than it really is. Like the mechanics are pretty simple because it's like I abstracted it as much as possible.
It's really cool. I really, really, really dig it, and it's a fun game, and it is fun to drop into stuff. In fact, if people are picking up the Demon Plague adventure, it goes great in the Demon Plague adventure as well. But we're here to talk about the Forest Hymn and Picnic, right? So, what is the Forest Hymn and Picnic? Tell me a little bit about it.
This is like my personal heartbreaker, but it's not like a mechanical heartbreaker. It's like a setting heartbreaker. So that's the big thing. It's running on a heavily modified licensed version of Demon Lord because I really like Demon Lord. I'm super familiar with it. It works really well with the setting. The entire world is a big, endless, kind of haunted, absurd forest. And you play as a person, and the people are dropped into the woods by the stork. They're not like native to the woods. Or you play as an animal person, which is like an animal pretending to be a person. Or you play as a ghost, which is like a walking pinata almost. They wear costumes to keep them contained so they don't float off into the air in a swift breeze. And they're full of stuff like candy or bees or whiskey, stuff like that.
I love that. That's awesome. So you said it's based on sort of a heavily modified version of Shadow of the Demon Lord. What parts of Shadow of the Demon Lord did you think made it perfect for the Forest Hymn and Picnic?
The advancement system, like the way that the paths work, that's a big one. And then the boons and the banes are, it's just solid game design, you know? It just kind of spoke to, I had originally this game it was just about animals. It was going to be like everybody was going to play a different animal, but they're all like idiot animals, like Mr. Toad in The Wind in the Willows.
Yes.
Um, so, and that's kind of where this started a couple of years ago. And then I made a system from the ground up and it just didn't play very well. That was like my first real dive into designing mechanics. And then I switched it over to an existing system. I was using it with Troika, which is a fighting fantasy clone.
Oh yeah, yeah. Troika's great. I love Troika.
Yeah. And it works. It worked a little bit better. And then I decided that Troika wasn't enough because it's pretty light. And I designed a whole new system. It used like an old school phase rip to hit table. Like you rolled a d12, consult the table. Worked in play a lot faster than phase rip did, and sounds. But it didn't play test as well. People were like, the table's cool, but why when there's other stuff? And so, yeah, at that point, I was like, well, I should just talk to Schwab and see what his thoughts of me using Demon Lord were. And instead of actually talking to him, I took the game to our regular Demon Lord game. And after we played, I was like, hey, guys, want to make some characters in this Demon Lord setting thing I made? And Rob was into it, and the mechanics, it worked really well. And so we worked out a licensing deal, and now it's powered by the Demon Lord.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And I love that, there are so many things to love about Shadow of the Demon Lord's mechanics. Like you said, the advancement system, the way that you sort of have all these branching paths that don't have a lot of prerequisites, in most cases, no prerequisites, right? That you can just go from one thing to the next and be like a dwarf fighter technomancer, warlock if you want to. Like, that's awesome. I love that, right? So I think there's some cool things there, and the boons and the banes make for super easy gameplay, but also super dynamic gameplay, which is really cool. So yeah, if listeners haven't checked out Shadow of the Demon Lord, I think it's something to definitely check out. And it sounds like, so the Forest Hymn and Picnic, it sounds like setting wise is very different from Demon Lord. When I think of Demon Lord, I think like gritty, dark fantasy, ultra violent, that kind of thing. What are we looking here at the Forest Hymn and Picnic as far as that level of sort of violence and stuff goes?
Oh, you could play the Forest Hymn and Picnic without ever having heard of Shadow of the Demon Lord. It would make like no difference. It's like night and day. Even like the setting is totally in the Forest Hymn. Most like player characters don't die. Combat's a little de-emphasized in it. A lot of the adventuring is like winning contests at the county fair or investigating supernatural mysteries and getting lost in the woods. There's fighting, but it's not gritty. It's not dark. It's silly. It's whimsical.
You talked about like a stork deposits you into the world. So how does that work? Obviously it sounds very what we tell children when we don't want to tell them about sex, about where babies come from, right?
Right. I didn't grow up super in love with like the Lord of the Rings. I don't read a whole lot of fantasy. I like dwarves and elves and stuff, and I like The Hobbit. My parents animated The Hobbit when I was a kid, and they're like, "Read this; it'll turn you into a man." Um, but my favorite stories from when I was a kid were like Wind in the Willows and stuff like that, and like fables or books about animals being idiots, basically. So like not Redwall, but definitely Frog and Toad or stuff like that. And I think a lot of people start with like that kind of fantasy, that sort of anthropomorphic animals on doing shenanigans and hijinks.
Sure, Peter Rabbit, right?
Yeah, Peter.
Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly. And then we move on to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and then we decide we're gonna like try drugs for the first time and read Lord Dunsany, and we forget about that silly stuff. And but I never really forgot about the silly stuff. I always wanted to play in one of those silly worlds, and so that's where a lot of the influence for the Forest Tim comes from. Like the stork dropping kids into the woods. That's straight from Looney Tunes. I take a lot of influence from kid stuff, but it's not like the game's not necessarily for kids.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And when we're talking to about animal folk, how anthropomorphized are we, right? Like if I'm a, I don't know, if I'm a pig person, are all my limbs cloven? Do I walk on all fours, or is it sort of more a pig person?
I deliberately don't touch on that in the game. That's up for you to interpret. But the thing with the pigs is they sort of in the forest. There used to be people. People used to be native in the woods, and they disappeared. And they left behind like towns and villages and ruins and stuff. Think like colonial era North America. Those people disappeared, and the animals walked out of the woods, and they put on their clothes and read their books, and they sort of like learned to be people by reading and remembering what they thought of the people that had used to live in the woods. And so they're sort of pretending to be people, but they speak English and get along with the people and the ghosts. For all intent and purpose, they're mostly like just like people, just a little bit dumber.
Nice. I like that. It just creates such a evocative idea of what the setting is all about. And there's all kinds of great stuff that I want to get into about quirks and anecdotes and things like that. But I also want to talk quickly about ghosts. So, I think when we think of fantasy ghosts, we either think of like these horrifying, sort of visages of dead people, or we think about kid ghosts from, stories wearing sheets and
Sheets over their heads. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Where did you get this idea for ghosts being more like piñatas and that sort of thing?
So, like I said, the game started as just animals. I started to want something a little bit more, and I was thinking about have you ever heard of the like wizard fighter thief theory that every class in every game ever published can eat like they all root back to wizard fighter thief or some strange combination of them.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I have heard that.
It's kind of like fortune cookies or like astrology or whatever, like where you read it and it just your brain wants it to make sense. Like it's easy to call like bullcrap on that, but it's fun to think about. And I was thinking that I kind of wanted to deliberately embody that with the game, and so I added people, and they're sort of like the fighter type, and then animals were the thief type, and just thinking about what would fit in the setting and be a wizard type, but be distinct enough from the other two. I basically just watched a bunch of cartoons to get ideas. And it was like I watched Over the Garden Wall for the first time, which has turned into a huge influence on the game, and a bunch of old black and white Merry Melodies and stuff. And I just got this idea where it would be Ghost, they would be the wizard archetype, but I didn't want them to be like unfinished business ghosts. I wanted them to be kind of as silly as the other dudes and dudettes in the game. So I was just thinking like, oh, they're like scarecrows. The ghosts are like mist forms or whatever, and they're stuffed into scarecrows and sort of just kind of ran with the costuming and the filling to hold them down so they don't float away like a balloon and stuff like that.
Nice. That's really a cool idea. I like that lore too to go along with ghosts. It just seems like such a sort of fun but also mysterious place to play. So within the forest, is there a lot of mystery since there used to be people there and now they've been driven from the forest? Is that kind of the idea that it's like you never know what's around the next bend and that sort of thing?
Definitely, yeah. Just the woods by itself is thick and labyrinthine almost. It's easy to get lost. And then there's wisps running around, and they're kind of like your trickster. They disguise themselves and they try to steal kids away and cause trouble. And and then you have like the spookwood, which is this sort of like non-permanent, roving, very haunted wood, very like gnarly wood. The trees don't have leaves; they're all thick with spooky, mean faces, and there's like skeletons walking around. Skeletons aren't necessarily bad guys, but they're there, and that's where monsters roam. And so each monster in the forest hymn is a unique creature that's made through play. Like last night, we were playing the forest hymn, and the heroes get into the spookwood because they're going to find a new maypole for the harvest festival. And they run into this skeleton who warns them about monsters. And then the skeleton started asking the heroes like what they think monsters look like. And then each one of the heroes kind of said something, and then that monster came out of the woods. So like one of the players was like, "Man, what's super scary? People with too much money who use it irresponsibly," or something like that. And so this monster was like stomping around, and pennies were coming out of it. And someone had said that I bet a monster looks like a giant slimy woodpecker. And so you kind of like piece all this together on the GM side of it, and so you can put those monsters in the spookwood and stuff like that. So yeah, the forest has got a lot of weird stuff going on.
That's cool. And so the forest is almost like, I mean, it is a character in the story.
Yeah, and it's full of like wandering NPCs and robbers and people with their own sort of troubles, and you have hermits and stuff living out in the woods. Like there's always something interesting going on in the woods.
That's cool. Do you see this as like a game where people tell more of an episodic story where like each adventure, each session is like sort of combined into one thing, or do you see more of like an overarching plot? It almost like this is so weird to say because I know it is not a game meant for children, but it's reminding me of Saturday morning cartoons in the sense that like the Smurfs are going on an adventure in the forest.
It's actually deliberately both. So you know how in Demon Lord it's milestone leveling or whatever advancement, and after each cool adventure you do, you go up a level. It works the same way in the Forest Hymn, except for when you pick your path, which is called your way in the woods in this one. It's more like traveler style life path. So you pick your new path or your way, and it's at level one, you start down your sort of life in the woods, and you can become like a rakel, which has no you wouldn't have like a real job. You just have a lot of money and you're kind of a jerk. Or you can become like a postal carrier if you wanted to get into the bureaucratic life, or a fortune teller's apprentice if you want to do magic and stuff. And so you pick this way, and it tells you what you're up to in between adventures, and time passes. And so you go on adventures with your crew episodically, and then time passes in the woods when you're not playing. And when you come back to the table, your hero, your character has, they've lived a little bit. They've gotten some more money, and they've learned some new things, and they're ready to go on another adventure. And then twice through advancing, a whole year passes. All the adventures do link up in a sense, but it sort of doubles down on the episodicness that Demon Lord already has in it.
That's really, really cool that there's this time between adventures and allows for the character development. So it's not just like, hey, guess what? We fought those things and now I know how to shoot a fireball and I didn't before, right? There's a reason for that to make sense. Is it like Demon Lord in the sense that there are a bunch of different paths that you will go down? Like Demon Lord has a novice and an expert and a master. Is it sort of like that?
Yep. Works the same way, and just like Demon Lord, you don't have to stick to the same sort of branch. There's no pre-requirement or prerequisite for picking the different ways in the wood. And you can, like in Demon Lord, something I think that gets overlooked a lot is you can pick like a second expert path instead of picking a master path. You can scoop back a path or a way and make more, choices that way. So yeah, mix and match. I think I did the math, and I don't have as many paths as Demon Lord does because it's a bit ridiculous. But there's like over 500 different, like not including the different types of animal folk you can be. There's like over 500 different like unique combinations of forest dweller that you can end up with at the end of your 10 sessions or so.
Wow, that's really cool. And is it, you said different types of animal folks. So we're talking like you could be a weasel or you could be a bear or that sort of thing?
Yep. Last night we had a pig, Putnam pig, and when you roll up your characters in the forest sim, you do it just like in Demon Lord, where you get a set of tables and you can either roll on the table or you can pick and choose or sort of use the tables as a guide to make your own. But part of that includes like a list of types of animals, and it's like mostly forest animals like grackles, like birds and crows and bears, foxes, wolves.
That's really cool. I like that a lot. Hey everybody, James Introcaso here. I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Kobold Press and the Creature Codex. The Creature Codex from Kobold Press brings you nearly 400 new foes for 5th edition. Everything from acid ants to zombie lords. If you have the Tome of Beasts, this is a spiritual sequel to that. You don't need the Tome of Beasts to get all the goodness out of the Creature Codex, but honestly, the Tome of Beasts is amazing, and so is the Creature Codex. New monsters are a thing I'm always looking for, and this has everything to surprise your players. Wasteland dragons and dinosaurs, all new golems, including the Keg Golem, elemental lords, animal lords, all kinds of great NPCs, chieftains for other leaders like ratfolk, centaur, goblins, trollkin, and more. New undead, including a Hierophant Lich to menace low-level characters. Plus, if you love me, I am one of the designers on this book. You should definitely check it out at the Kobold Press store on the Kobold Press website, koboldpress.com. You can surprise your players with monsters they won't be expecting from the Creature Codex. While you're there, check out the Tome of Beasts too if you don't already have it.
All right, back to the show.
And speaking of character generation, to get an idea of what sort of characters you can create, people should go to theforesthymn.com. They should check out this webpage because you've got links to sort of all of the different characters that can be created, links to the character sheets that people can see. I love that there's a fancy and regular character sheet, by the way, which is basically printer friendly and not printer friendly.
Yeah, printer destroy.
Yeah. Really, really cool. But also, every time you reload the page, so if you're on the page about animal folk, you can reload the page and it will give you a different animal folk to look at. This looks like it must have taken forever to build.
Dude, I had to teach myself JavaScript. Like, I had some friends help me out. Shout out to Brad Murray, who wrote like Diaspora and Elysian Flare. He helped me out a lot with the JavaScript. But yeah, basically I had to teach myself JavaScript and then sort of teach myself how to use it responsibly and then build out these random generators. But yeah, all the information on them comes straight from the book. And then when I change things in my manuscript, I go back and I change them on the website too.
That's really cool. It's really, really exciting to like go through because what I asked you about animals, I've just been refreshing the animal page to be like, what else can I be? Oh, I can be an otter. That's really cool. Yeah, I just got grackle. There's a ton of amazing options. And on the main page, you're able to refresh the main page and get some really cool story points and stuff going on. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So on the main page, I wanted to build like like when you're making RPG stuff, it's pretty easy to make stuff, throw it out on Twitter or Reddit or whatever, to link to your drive-through store or to your own web store or whatever. I think more games should have just like a business card type informational website, right? I wanted something that I could point people to and also collect email addresses for the Kickstarter. And so I got this idea where I would make this just sort of like longish, like informational single page website, sort of formatted like a storybook. And I was like, well, the very first thing people need to see when they load it up is something strange going on in the woods. So I had to reteach myself JavaScript because I did those generators like months ago. The random site in the wood I did, 2 weeks ago. So like reteach myself JavaScript. And then in the book, I have a bunch of appendixes of different things. There's like an appendix of adventure prompts, and there's an appendix of strange sights in the woods. And those all kind of come from that. And there's 40 or 50 of them on the website.
That's awesome. You have put a ton of great work into this website, and so people should definitely check it out. It's just so much fun to be on, and it gives you a great idea of what the game is and what it's about and how it all works. So let's dive in here and talk about the Kickstarter a little bit. What are people getting? They're getting the game, right, when they pledge to the Kickstarter?
Yep, they'll get the game. I got my print quotes back not too long ago, and it changed everything up. Turns out that when you're doing a 6x9 book, even if you're doing like getting all the fancy options, it's still like half as cheap as doing a big boy book with not fancy options. So what I originally was going to do was do a super limited print run for the Kickstarter. You could only get it through the Kickstarter, and everything else would go print on demand. But the price was right from the printer, and so I'm going to do a full print run of like 1,500 books to start. And so when you pledge, you'll get the book, a PDF, and then everyone who pledges gets all the stretch goals. We keep the pledge levels pretty simple. When we did Hex Kit, we had 3 pledge levels. It was like you've already owned the Hex Kit artwork because the first iteration, and you could pledge $10 and get the software and the new tiles. And then there was a level you could pledge $20 and get everything with the Kickstarter. And then we had a $30 level, which was basically like, give us 10 extra dollars because we're cute. So I'm going to do something similar with that, where it's like, PDF backer, print PDF backer. Rob Schwab tells me I need to do a retail backer, so I guess I'll do that. And then we'll do like, hey, pledge a little bit more because you think we're cute. So
nice. That's really cool. Certainly taking advice from Rob Schwab when it comes to role-playing games is a good idea.
I'm super lucky to have that guy around. He's a gem and a babe.
Definitely. So have you also done maps for this and art?
Yeah. So the way we're doing the art, I've got a couple of arts. My pal Casey, she's great, and my pal Sam, who's I've worked with in the past with Sword and Backpack. They're going to be doing basically foreground art, characters and actions, and then all of the background art and like the set art of like the woods and inside houses and stuff. I'm doing all that because I work in traditional mediums and they work in digital mediums. It's going to give it that Looney Tune, Cuphead sort of like cartoon feel. I did do a map of the Forest Hymn, but the Forest Hymn it's not like a set place. There's not like named locations, and the stork is the only like named NPC in it. So the map it's just a big map of the woods, and it says possibly the Forest Hymn, and then somewhere on it down in the corner it says like you might be here. And so so there's maps. And there's like maps of like an example town or village or whatever and stuff like that. But it's pretty art heavy.
That's awesome. And it sounds like a lot of the game is like done. Like you've written a lot of the game. Is that?
No, yeah, the whole game's done.
Wow.
Yeah, it's play tested. The cool thing about licensing Demon Lord is the hard part is done. The math is done. So most of the play testing's been like, hey, is this cool? Yes or no? And so we're still doing that. We're going to keep doing that through the Kickstarter. I'll be probably like twice a week during the Kickstarter, and then up until the book is released, I'll be doing play tests and running it for our backers and taking feedback. One of our stretch goals is going to be a deck of like NPC cards. So you can just draw random NPCs, and I'm building those NPCs off of the characters that my playtesters do. So we had Putnam Pig last night. the guy who played it, he played him very well. He managed to like create this very very like in canon pig without ever having played the game before. So he became an NPC. So yeah. So backers will be able to get to play the game with me, and a lot of them will have their characters turned into these NPC cards.
And then as far as some of the more specific rules go, I on your website it says you've got simplified magic rules and simplified inventory management and a wealth system that keeps players from having to count or track each penny. Can you give me an overview of the magic inventory and cash?
Sure. So magic is totally different. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I hate magic in D&D. I don't really like it in Demon Lord. I don't like fancy in magic. The way that magic works in the Forest Hymn is, magic tricks, and magic works seasonally. So say the spell that lets you disappear in a cloud of smoke and confetti and reappear in the closest backpack or bag near you. That is a spring spell. And if you use that magic trick in the spring, it works flawlessly. It's great. You do your roll to see how great it works, but it's almost always going to work. If you use that spell out of season, then you run the risk of it failing. But you don't spend anything to cast spells. You're not, in any way like penalized for casting spells. It's a very like simple system. And then the way that I did wealth is went back to my love of abstracting things. And in the world, in the setting, they pay for stuff. Their currency is pennies, and it's like a copper penny, and it's got the stork's face on one side and like a big cent symbol on the other. But you don't count how many pennies you accrue. You have a wealth score, and that's like your purchasing power. It's like all the pennies you have. Like if you got a rich grandma, or you own a business or something like that. And instead of like, and if say you want to buy something, right? If your wealth score is 4 and you want to buy like a fancy tea set and it has a cost of 4, you just buy it. You don't, your purchasing power is good enough. You can afford it. You don't dock yourself any wealth or anything. If you want to buy, like maybe you want to buy a new bicycle and it has a cost of 7 wealth, you subtract the difference from your wealth. So if you have 4 wealth, you would take 3 wealth away. And so you got your bike, but you're down, put a dent in your purchasing power and you're down to 1 wealth. And you can build wealth up and you can go into negative wealth, stuff like that.
What I like about that system of going into debt is there is some adventure possibility there too. I agree with you about Fancy and Magic. I think for me, it works well as like a gamey thing, but it also makes no sense. Like I don't understand from a story perspective how you lose spells.
Yeah. I don't get it either. And I mean, admittedly, like I mentioned earlier, I don't read a lot of fantasy, so I'm not really sure in what Vance novel this comes up. But in like, imagine like living in Fantasyland and you're like, oh, tight, I can do magic, but every time I do it, I get a headache or my spleen hurts or whatever. Like you would never do magic, It would become not worth it.
Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. So I wanted magic tricks to always be viable. They're not, we don't have like summon mirror or split the earth open for a demon to pop out. They're little things, they match the setting. They're whimsical. They're like appear in another backpack or turn yourself into a bat.
That's really, really fun. I can't wait to get my hands on this. You certainly have my dollars, Cecil. You did both before you even came on because I love you and everything you do. But especially after this conversation, this sounds like a ton of fun and a thing that I really want to play. So, and if people are interested, again, the name of the game is The Forest Hymn and Picnic. People should go check it out on Kickstarter. They should go to theforesthymn.com to check out the awesome website we were talking about and to see what kind of character they can create. And they should check out your amazing work doing maps and a very different game than The Forest Hymn. Of course, Do Not Let Us Die in the Dark Night of this cold winter. Is there anything else, Cecil, we should cover before we wrap up?
Man, I think that's it. How about you, dude? Congratulations to you, Dragon Heist.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Dragon Heist released I guess on Friday in, not to like your Barnes and Nobles, but to your local bookstores and on D&D Beyond and Roll20 and that sort of thing. So.
That's big time. Like I know you worked on that, and that's awesome. And Dyson Logos worked on it too.
Oh yeah, another great cartographer,
Yeah,
Dyson Logos. Yeah, yeah, it was really really fun. It's a really different adventure because it's you can sort of slap different pieces around in it to build something new, which I think is really really fun. And a lot of people have been saying some very nice things about it, which is a huge compliment. And the team that worked on that adventure to design it was incredible. A guy named James Hake also worked on it, and he's super young. He's like right out of college and is already better than I am in every single way.
that's awesome. And then you got Burn Bright too. You're doing that with Roll20, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
definitely.
awesome. I love those dudes. I do stuff with Roll20, like I sell in the marketplace and stuff. And like I did an actual like Roll20 digital box set version of Cold Winter for it actually.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
So
yeah, they talk about it all the time in their Slack because they play it. It's Roll20 is really great, and the things you can do with it are really interesting. And we had a heck of a time creating Burn Bright too. Yeah, that was super super fun. So yeah, it's playtesting now. If you're a Roll20 Pro subscriber, go check it out. Thanks, Cecil, and I wish you the best with this Kickstarter. I think it's going to be incredible.
thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Wow, that was a great interview. Cecil is an incredible dude. If you want to be incredible in my eyes, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. Seriously, even if you're listening on another podcatcher app, odds are that app uses the iTunes algorithms to rate and recommend podcasts. So, if you leave us a 5-star review, I will read it out loud on the show and credit the person who left it, like Dr. Sinan. Dr. Sinan says, engaging and entertaining. I've really enjoyed listening to James talk with an interesting set of guests about such a diverse range of RPG topics. He brings such a great amount of enthusiasm to the discussions on Tabletop Babble. I've found out about a bunch of new to me RPG systems, and some of the ideas that have come up in the course of the interviews have been great sources of inspiration for my own world building and campaign creation efforts. And Jersey rocks! Well, thank you, Dr. Sinan. I really, really appreciate it, and I agree. New Jersey rules. Take that, other states. All right, people, if you want to learn more about what I am doing and my game design efforts, head on over to worldbuilderblog.com and follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. There's plenty of manuals out there to help you out.
I'm Lisa Chen, and I host Behold Her, a monthly podcast that shines a spotlight on women in the world of tabletop games. There are so many women to behold in this amazing hobby, and our experiences as female gamers are as diverse as we are as individuals. Through one-on-one interviews, audio essays, and panel discussions, all centered around a monthly theme, the guests on Behold Her share their unique stories as players, game masters, designers, artists, organizers, and so much more. Their words are inspiring, uplifting, and informative. Check out Behold Her Podcast wherever podcasts are found, or visit beholdherpodcast.com.